Hey, Matt, they just gave us the signal. That means we are live.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to being live.
Well, somebody texted me earlier and said, your microphones are on.
And those people who were picked up, they were not happy about being live.
No, actually, I plugged the microphones in right after we got done talking. So don't worry. None of that stuff you said made it out there.
It won't get around.
It won't get around. Get around. Oh, that's a Beach Boys song.
It is. It is.
All right. So thank y'all for joining us. Tonight, we're going to continue our study in the Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, depending on your translation. Sorry we could not be here last week. There was snow coming in. There was still snow on the ground. And so we decided that it would be best just to put this off so that we could come back together as we have made our custom on Wednesday night to talk more about this very interesting book.
Indeed. Although before we do, Clay, why don't you tell us a little bit about how your day's gone today?
Well, so whenever we sit around the table,
yes,
to eat supper, I usually start out and I'll say, okay, who wants to talk about their day? And one particular lady who happens to be my oldest daughter will start raising her hand and go, ooh, 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 ooh.
But she's so shy and retiring.
Oh, you would think. So she'll start out and say, okay, well, I woke up at 6:15 and I came downstairs, and she just rolls the whole day. I'll save you from all of that.
Okay.
Last night, Lily came downstairs, not in her usual boisterous mode. And she said she's been really considering and thinking very, very much about being baptized. And I talked to her. She had talked to her mom quite a bit. And I talked to her, and she gave a very mature answer. That's something that with kids, particularly kids raised in the church, are seeing this. They might ask when they're 5 years old. And, I question my kids when they were young.
Yep.
You've done the same.
I've had many conversations with one of my kids in particular.
Yeah. And they don't give very mature, well thought out answers.
My friends want to get baptized.
Yeah.
I want to make God happy, that kind of stuff.
Right. And I thought she gave a very mature answer. And so tonight, with those that have meant so much to us and mean so much to us, Lily was baptized into Christ, and for that we do rejoice.
Amen. We're rejoicing with the angels in heaven, and we are giving the devil a big fat raspberry, because that's what we do.
That's right. Well, I'll say this, and then we'll move to the topic. When one of your children is baptized, whether you're doing it or not, it's kind of a privilege that I think parents should have. And I have not baptized anybody's kids. I encourage them to do it, the dad to do it. When one of your kids is baptized, it's a challenge to me as a father, as an adult Christian, to really examine where I'm at in my own walk of faith, to make sure that I still have that new Christian zeal, and that I have that desire to walk faithfully, to have that newbie hope, if I can put it that way.
Right.
And so as I kind of thought about that today, just doing my drive around, that's what really weighed on my mind. And so
absolutely,
I appreciate y'all to please pray for Lily, pray for us as her parents, and for us as her church family, to strengthen and encourage her as she begins this new walk of faith.
And let's be thanking God, too, for his salvation of yet another soul and adding someone else to the body of his son.
That's right. Thank y'all. Wow, Matt, we got a lot of folks that have already tuned in and logged in and are watching. They're telling us, I think we're finally getting them trained to tell us that they're watching. Thank y'all. We will get to everybody in just a few minutes and do the roll call. Everybody loves roll call.
They do.
If you're watching us and you're not a member of the Jackson Heights congregation, would you do me a little favor? Let us know where you're watching from. I think we've got one person on here that I think is up in Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, or Illinois.
Couldn't tell you.
I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue. I feel like I should know where they're from. So let us know where you're from and where you're watching from. We would greatly appreciate that. Also, and don't make any jokes, there's a share button if you're watching us on Facebook. The infamous share joke.
Yes.
Please hit that share button. Let folks know what you're watching tonight. The Bible study the kind of Bible study we engage in here at Jackson Heights. Like I told somebody the other day, raw is real.
We are.
And we just try to keep it real.
And notice that there is absolutely nothing in the Bible that is off limits either.
That's right. And
all this is the Word of God.
That's right. And so we're going to be talking about a very real topic tonight, one that affects a lot of folks, and that is sexual intimacy, particularly in marriage.
Yes.
And how do we teach that? Because I'm going to tell you, Matt, if you talk to a lot of people in the world, they think God and sex and the Bible just are not compatible with each other.
That is the truth. I mean, the idea I think that people have is that if you're a Christian, then that means you're like the church lady on Saturday Night Live, that you just sit there with your mouth all pursed up and you disapprove of everything, especially sex.
Right.
And that I think underlies the idea that if you're a Christian, then that means you just have to go through life joylessly, and anything that is enjoyable is not for you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas what the Bible actually teaches us is that God gives us all things richly to enjoy.
That's right. That's right. And especially as we think about and approach the Song of Solomon, here we have a couple, a man and a woman, the Shulamite and Solomon. That's the direction we're going with it. Here is a celebration of their love and their desire for sexual intimacy. Now, it's not raunchy. It's not as straightforward as perhaps we would read in a modern text, but it does have that poetic flair.
Yes.
And the metaphor that we see all the way through.
It's tasteful, but at the same time, it leaves you in no doubt of what it's talking about or how the participants feel about this.
That's right. Okay. We want to start out with the question about, you know what, I'll just use the regular terminology for it, sex education. Because one of the things that is here is particularly focusing from the female perspective. And in fact, if you're reading the Song of Solomon, and I have the English Standard here, and it will tell you who they believe is speaking. Does the CSB do that as well?
CSB does the same.
If you have a translation that does that, it's very helpful.
Yep.
Go through and just look who speaks the most. It's not Solomon.
Nope.
It's the woman. She is doing the majority of the speaking. She is doing the majority of the anticipation of the marriage bed. She's doing the majority of talking about how beautiful and lovely and delightful her husband is.
Absolutely. And I think that is so vital and so lacking from the modern presentation of sex and marital intimacy in churches.
Yeah.
Because at least when I was coming up, and I think it's still true today, the idea is very much that nice girls don't.
And bad boys do.
And bad boys do. And so you have this earnest little church girl who's been told all her life that nice girls don't. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly she gets married and she finds herself in a position where nice girls are supposed to. Right. But all of that negative discussion about sex is going to be something that she has to work through in her marriage. Right. It's a terrible burden to bear.
It is a terrible burden to bear. So let's talk about that for just a moment. And for those of you who are watching, give me a little feedback on this. I did not get much feedback. I'll admit, when I put the promo out this afternoon, Matt and I did show prep this afternoon, which is kind of rare. We don't usually do show prep, but we did do show prep on John Sharp Road.
We did.
As we passed each other, I'm like, hey, what do you think about this question? So we did our show prep on John Sharp. What was your exposure to sexual content like? What did your parents teach you about sex? What did your church teach? What did your friends teach you about sex? Where did you learn what you know about it? Because as we were talking before, we kind of had a little bit of a different experience on this.
We did.
Now, for those who may not know, and keep telling me who's watching, we'll come to roll call in a minute. I grew up here in Middle Tennessee all my life, and you grew up in
From about 10 up, I lived in Missouri.
So we're close, but it's still kind of a different experience.
Yeah, and I grew up in a college town too, where the culture was not at all like the rest of the state.
Right.
But in terms of what my exposure growing up was, my parents were wonderful, godly people.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had to identify their single biggest failure in training me and preparing me for life, it would be that.
Okay.
Because neither one of them said word one to me about sex the whole time I was growing up.
Right.
Church wasn't much different. That all I got there was adultery is bad, fornication was bad.
Right.
And that meant that essentially everything I learned about sex and sexuality growing up came from worldly sources.
Okay.
It came from my so knowledgeable and wise friends at school. It came from books. It came from movies. It came from TV. It came from the internet.
Right. The internet?
Yeah.
You had that as a kid?
Well, I am at the very bleeding edge of the internet generation, because I'm about 3 years younger than you are. They had a computer lab at school that was hooked up to Netscape.
Oh, wow. Netscape.
So,
yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that's going to be the experience of a lot of folks. And I know my folks are watching, and I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but I don't remember much. Now, that could just be me, because Shelley says you don't remember anything. But I don't remember much. And I should say this real quick for the audience. I know there's a lot of people watching that have my phone number. I cannot see you if you text me. Okay? I'm sorry. The SIM card is in that phone. This phone doesn't have a SIM card, and I'm not smart enough to figure out how to make the text messages from that phone show up on this phone. So don't text me.
No texting.
Yeah, I'm not answering text till after the show, but I don't remember much. And I was growing up in the mid to late 80s, early 90s, and so teen pregnancy was a big deal. And so all the teaching was geared around preventing teen pregnancy. And I told you the name of a couple of guys from high school, and I remember what the kind of stuff that they brought to school. And so I don't recall experiencing positive teaching. Now, we need teaching about sex and sexuality that does deal with the negative.
Yes.
We do need that.
Well, the Bible talks about sexual sin, so we should too.
And we should. But and in fact, I didn't put it this way in my notes, but I don't even see it now. But I actually had, if we solely focus on this perverted view of sex, and to just focus on negative things that gives sex and sexuality an air of sinfulness, and we never talk about its positive nature and its godly nature, and that it is enjoyable, and that it is to be something that is special to be experienced between the married couple.
Yes.
Then I think we're missing a lot.
Yes, because if all you ever say about sex is negative,
Right.
then the impression that you are conveying is that to be godly is to be sexless.
And so you bring that up, to be godly is to be sexless. Well, in the late 80s, then you have the rise, particularly among evangelical churches, of the purity culture. Now, as I was telling Matt to begin with, I don't remember a lot of exposure to that.
I don't either. I think both of us are a little too old. I didn't really see that until I hit law school.
Okay, so the purity culture is when somebody would wear the purity ring, so they have pledged to remain pure sexually before marriage. And that could take different forms. I've read accounts where people actually stood before the congregation as teens and preteens, or tweens, I guess they're called now, and would make those kinds of purity pledges. It's an entire culture within, particularly within evangelical churches. There is plenty of writing out there about how skewed that whole culture was and that whole mentality was, because according to what I've read, a lot of people came out of that and said, sex is sinful, and therefore now I'm married and I'm not feeling what I was promised. I'm not experiencing what I was promised because of this skewed view of sex and sexuality.
Yeah, and again, I think that's something that especially women struggle with. That men seem to be able to, just because men are wired differently, to shake that off more. Right. But for women, that can really weigh on them.
Right. And that, to me, that is the starkest contrast between what we see in church culture, because that's generally my experience. And I'm out in the world every day, but my most intimate conversations are with church folks. So within church culture, it seems that guys are hardwired to want that all the time, and women are not hardwired to want that all the time. But that is such a stark contrast to what we see in Song of Solomon.
And I think that is so. And I think that difference is largely something that we create in conservative religious culture.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's turn to roll call real quick. Let's see. Now my list starts off and says Dave is watching and Jane is watching and 15 other people are watching.
Okay.
So Dave, family, thanks. Janie, thanks. 15 other people, thank you for watching.
1 through 15.
That's right. Tammy's watching and Rachel and Lauren's watching. Hey, we actually do have a live audience today. Other than the tech guys in the booth.
Yes. Who
we could never do this without Josh and Chris back there. And I think Isaac's back there too.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And they are wonderful and they're indispensable.
They are. Ashley's watching and Carolyn is watching and Lynn and Angela and Kelsey. The Watsons are watching. David and Kelsey both. Joni Shively is watching. And let's see, Tim is watching, and Lauren and the Swells are watching. Larry and Linda are watching. Barnett. Larry. No, you know what? I just messed up, Chris. I just totally spazzed out on your mom's name. Yeah, I did. You going to say it? Nope.
Just to leave you in doubt and confusion.
Yes, I'm sure the other Larry and Linda are watching as well. Let's see, Margaret and Rufus are watching. And let's see, Betty Rhodes is watching. Hey, Betty, how you doing? And, there's Brenda's watching, Larry and Brenda. Thank you. I knew I'd get to. I'm so sorry. Don is watching. Aren't you glad I do this to make a fool of myself?
Yes, I am. I wouldn't do it.
Debbie are watching as well. So thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah. We greatly appreciate your attention.
We really do. This is something that and Dennis has just weighed in and said he is watching as well.
Good.
This is something we do enjoy doing this. We get a lot out of it. And I hope that you do too. We have a fun time, but I hope that we have very serious discussions about weighty Bible topics that need to be mentioned.
This is certainly one of those.
Right. And I know Ray and Ginger are watching, Dad and Ginger are watching because Dad texted me earlier and said your mics are on.
So that's a sign.
Yeah, there we go.
They're there early.
Yeah, he was there early. I appreciate all of you for doing that. Okay. We've kind of delved into how sexuality, sex and sexuality is generally handled, generally taught within a familial context and within church context. Letting the devil control the messaging. Instead, we need to let God and His Word control the messaging. So the question that I want to put forth is, I'm sorry. I love you. You know I love you. I've loved you for a long time. Rick and I worked together many, many moons ago. Maybe maybe before Shelley and I even got married. And I hope you're doing well, pal. Okay, how should we go about teaching our children a whole biblical view of sex? And for your older, wiser parents out there, would y'all please weigh in on this? How should we approach a sex and sexuality from a whole biblical view, not just focusing on the negative, but incorporating the positives as well?
I think that starts, first of all, with having the conversation, and B, having the conversation in such a way that makes it clear that they are encouraged to contribute to the conversation themselves.
Okay. How so? Walk me through that.
Well, in our case, we decided that once our kids turned 8, that we were the same-sex parent was going to take them aside and have the talk with them, and do so in a non-nervous, non-alienating way, and making it clear that the conversation is open.
Okay.
And so that means that from time to time, the conversation,
Right.
we come home from services and I'm getting ready for Sunday dinner, and Zoe asks, "Hey, Dad, what's a eunuch?"
Oh.
And so we have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not that any of us, I think, really enjoy the thought of discussing private topics with our children, but that's just a case where we have to cowboy up.
Right.
And be willing to talk about these things in a way that doesn't shut our kids down.
Okay. And again, and I want to solicit some responses from you older, wiser parents out there. What worked for you? If you felt like you were successful at teaching your children about sex and sexuality in a way that encompassed all of what the Bible teaches, not just the negative, but to finish.
And some parents do a phenomenal job of this. For instance, there's one family that I'm familiar with. I'm not going to out them here.
Right.
But I know that when their daughter got married,
Yeah.
The day after the wedding night, her relationship with her mom and their willingness and freedom to talk about this stuff was such that she went through her wedding night experience and talked about, what's normal here, what should I expect, how is this going to change?
Right.
And that to me is really the gold standard.
Right. Yeah. As I was kind of thinking through this particular question, because to actually finish the question that I put out there, how best can we teach our children a whole biblical view of sex? I put that it is good, pleasurable, and exhilarating, but also something for marriage.
Yes.
Because as we've mentioned so often, it's the sole focus is on the negative.
Yes. And
we forget the positive nature.
Almost all the time, whenever the devil is leading us to sin, he's taking something that is good and created by God, and he is perverting and distorting and twisting it.
Right, right.
And so our responsibility needs to be to present all of God's good gifts, including that one.
And so as I was kind of thinking through this today about how is it, because the reason for this question is that the woman, as we approach the Song of Solomon, she's young, she's of marriageable age, but she's expressing some things here that shows, I think, a depth of knowledge that she is, one, desiring it, two, that she is, can I use the word fantasizing about it?
I think so.
Okay. She has some depth and understanding that seems a little beyond her years, if I could say it that way. So as I was kind of thinking about, let me finish this thought, and I'll come to you. But I got to thinking, if you're living in a one-room home, your exposure to this is a little different than the way it is in our modern homes, where the parents are on this side of the house and the kids are on that side of the house.
And, I have friends who came up real poor.
Yeah.
And, they definitely had a lot more firsthand experience of sex as kids than I did.
Right. And so that got me to thinking, not only do we need to be not embarrassed to talk about it, but we also, as parents, need to model healthy sexuality within the marriage. That we need to model for our kids a desire for intimacy. Now, you're going to do that on several different levels. I mean,
And this is not like, hey, kids, let me put on this thing for you to teach you.
Yeah.
It's just that even though this is a private thing, at the same time, it's not something that you should be attempting to conceal from your own children.
Right. And by modeling, I didn't mean the banana demonstration or anything with a condom, but what I mean is,
and that's not really the point anyway.
Right. The model affection for your spouse.
Yes.
Model sexual or physical love. Not by that, by touch, by kissing, by holding hands, by giving the look that your kids all, once they're teens, are like, oh, good grief. Let them see this is what we long for and enjoy with each other. And
recognize that marriage is about body and soul and mind and spirit and all of it.
Right.
And it all works together.
Yeah. Isaac is getting old enough, and Lily's old enough too, that we kind of have to watch the banter that we've used, because their understanding. It used to be when they were small, they didn't get it. It's kind of like the Cosby Show. I grew up in an era where Thursday nights was must-see TV, and I would watch the Cosby Show, and my parents would laugh, and I'd be like, that wasn't even funny. And then I would laugh, and they wouldn't laugh. And then I got older, and I got me some kids, and I got married. I was married, and then we watched the Cosby Show, and I'm like, whoa, I can't believe that's what they were talking. It's just, we need that in our marriage to model for our children what love really looks like. Because I think we should ask ourselves a question as dads, and we have a mom in the room, so mom, you need to ask yourself as a mom, do I want my daughters to marry someone like me? Do you want your son to marry somebody like you? Do we want them to have a marriage like us? And we need to be modeling for them what a godly marriage looks like, particularly from this vantage point of sex and sexuality, because as you get to looking at what all is written in the Bible, particularly in the wisdom literature about marriage, I won't say all of it, but the majority of it is about sexual intimacy. It's amazing how much you don't read anything about how to communicate, about how to have quality time. I told Shelley, I said, so much of what we read.
Well, there's don't nag.
Okay. I know there's no don't nag. In fact, actually, that proverb's repeated like 3 times.
Yes. Hint.
Yeah. I was telling Shelley earlier as we were talking this out, I said, so much of what you see about marital advice is female-centric. Thank you. I have a female shaking her head. Yes. Yeah, it's about how to communicate. Guys don't communicate. That's right. We don't. That's not our deal.
I grunt.
Oh, yeah. Whatever. It's how to communicate, how to have quality time. We have to be trained on how to have quality time. That's just not our deal. But as I was telling Matt earlier, every marriage counseling that I've had to deal with involves sex. Whether it was a lack of sex or seeking sex outside of marriage, but it always involves sex. And maybe some of the marriage advice that we start giving deals with sex and sexuality because that's what the scriptures deal with. And we need to be showing our children what this looks like, so hopefully they don't grow up and find themselves in a godly marriage in all aspects except within the marriage bed.
And the problem there is that if you have this hypothetical marriage that is godly in all aspects except the marriage bed, then over time, the problems there are going to erode everything else.
Right.
It's, again, back to this whole body aspect of Christianity that I keep on talking about.
Right.
That, where is your marriage with your body? Where is your body with your marriage?
Right.
And if the answer is not good there,
right,
then you can be sure that other problems are going to show up too.
That's right. Hey, I'm going to ask you guys in the booth real quick. Are we frozen? Is the stream frozen? Yes? No? What? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Because it's just frozen on my monitor up here. So we're good. Okay. I just wanted to double check that. Okay. So let me throw out what time we got there. About halfway down. Let's look at the text. So we've done a lot talking around it and referencing it 2 weeks ago quite a bit. Why do you think the woman is so passionately longing for Solomon, for the man, which defies the stereotype, at least within modern America, or at least within the church, that she's the one who is initiating this desire?
There is a lot of pursuing the man all the way through the Song of Solomon.
Right.
And I think the obvious answer in Song of Songs chapter 1 is she's doing this because this is what she wants. This is the God-given desire that is within her.
Okay.
I mean, just look at what she says in verses 2 through 4. Oh, that he would kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your caresses are more delightful than wine. The fragrance of your perfume is intoxicating. Your name is perfume poured out. No wonder young women adore you. Take me with you. Let's hurry. Oh, that the king would bring me to his chambers.
Right.
This is somebody who is, this is not teeny bopper love here. This is not a middle school crush.
Right.
This is a woman who is looking forward to the act of physical love with her husband.
Right. And so she has this intense desire and passion for that. And in fact, that's the thread all the way through. I mean, the intensity level never stops.
Song of Songs is a celebration primarily of female sexuality.
That's right. Which cuts against the grain of the stereotype, particularly within Christian culture.
Yes, it is. All the purity culture stuff clearly does not come from Song of Songs.
So I'm going to have to admit something. I know you put out an article today, and I was so busy I did not get a chance to read it, about value and worth. Was that today? Or
yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay. I still haven't got to read it yet, but I will. But it made me think, when I saw that pop up in my email, it made me think about verse 5. She begins to describe herself. Can you read verse 5 there?
Sure.
Maybe even go all the way down through at least the first part of 6.
I'll do all the way down through 7. There's something interesting in 7 too.
Sure.
Daughters of Jerusalem, I am dark like the tents of Kedar, yet lovely like the curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I am dark, for the sun has gazed on me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me take care of the vineyards. I have not taken care of my own vineyard.
Right.
Tell me, you whom I love, where do you pasture your sheep? Where do you let them rest at noon? Why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions?
Okay, so at the very outset, she begins to describe herself.
Yes.
Now she says, "Look, I'm not perfect. My skin is a lot darker than it should be because I got to get out in the sun and work. But I am valuing herself is what is part."
I think that the more lovely a woman views herself, the more loving she will want to be.
And I'll throw the challenge out there, because I've never heard a guy put himself down. Have you?
Not about stuff like appearance.
Yeah, I have never heard that. Have you? We got a lady in house. Have you ever heard a man put himself down? No.
But women beat themselves up all the time.
Women beat themselves up all the time. And so here's the thing. Here's my challenge to women who beat themselves up. How do you want your husband to see you? Do you want him to see you with eyes that says, I love her, she is beautiful, she's my woman, I want her? Or do you want him to see you the way you talk about yourself? Because the longer you talk yourself down, the more you're tempting him to look down on you. Can I get an amen? No.
Shut you down.
Yeah. Well, it's just, but she does not portray that. She is like, I am lovely and I am beautiful.
Yes.
I have some skin imperfections, but I am lovely.
And it is interesting that you have someone who is literally a vineyard keeper,
Right.
who then switches to innuendo in the last part of verse 6.
Yeah.
And says, I have not taken care of my own vineyard. She's not talking about agriculture here.
No. I think here in the first part, vineyard is herself. Later, the vineyard becomes
more specific.
More specific for female anatomy.
Yes.
And so we have the play on words all the way through.
Yes.
But she values herself.
She does. And yet it is very clear in what direction her her passion is directed.
Right.
And that's what we see going on in verse 7. Because I think most people in our society would read right over, why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? But
yes,
if you go back to the book of Genesis,
when
you see women veiling themselves, that is a sign of sexual readiness.
Yes.
And she says, I don't want to be ready for them. I want to be ready for you.
Yes. And in fact, if you go back to the story of Jacob.
Is it Jacob?
No.
Isaac and Rebekah. Rebekah veils herself.
Okay. Rebekah veils herself.
Tamar veils herself.
Tamar veils herself as prostitute. What, does Ruth veil herself?
I think she might.
Maybe we need to bring up Ruth if we get any extra time, but
not looking likely. But
yeah, well, I mean, extra time as we work our way through.
There's actually a lot in common between Ruth and Song of Solomon. They feel very similar.
Yes. Okay. Have we lost the feed altogether? Okay.
Okay.
If y'all are joining us on another feed, sorry that feed failed. We were having some interruptions tonight, and I think it just shut itself down, but has restarted.
Yeah, the gremlins are at war back there.
Yeah, but thank you for joining us again, and I'll be back to monitoring that in just a moment, because I do have one question here that I think we need to hone in on, because one of the things that we see in the Song of Solomon is that it is a marriage song.
Yes.
We do have a marriage. Now you mentioned in our introduction, and I think in our show prep today, as funny as it was to do it there in the middle of the road.
Yes.
We don't have to read this in a chronological format.
No.
That it's building up to the marriage. It's just a collection of songs. We know they're married. They're anticipating marriage. Then they're married. Then we see them anticipating again. Yes. So is it pre-marriage, after marriage? We don't have to read it chronologically.
It's looking at the same thing from different angles.
From different angles. So this is a marriage song. So the question that I think we need to put out there: what role does desire for and delight in sexual intimacy with one spouse, what role does that play in strengthening the bond of marriage?
I would say that, as folks get older, maybe this is different once you've already built that good marriage. Mm-hmm. But certainly to start off with, I think it is very hard to have your relationship with your spouse grow the way it should,
right?
Unless your physical relationship with your spouse is also growing along with it,
right? There is this. Go ahead.
I mean, this is all part of God's design, and just like you wouldn't bend over the engine of a car and just start carrying handfuls of stuff out and expect the car to work right.
Right.
If you take away the sexual dimension of marriage, then why would you expect your marriage to work right?
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes what we do There is a maturing of the marriage relationship. It starts out hopefully on a very high note, and it will age and mature along the way.
Yes.
And maybe there will be less sexual intimacy as you grow older, because that's just a fact of life.
Yes.
Maybe there's less as careers are going or children are entering the picture, and we're going this place and that place and this place every day.
Yes.
That's just part of maturing of the relationship.
Yes.
But we should never lose sight of, as you mentioned, this component of the marriage relationship that, like nothing else, bonds two people together, because it gives you something as a married couple to look forward to.
Yeah.
When you got a rough day and a crazy schedule, you can look forward to this. You find comfort here in the arms of your spouse like you can't find anywhere else.
Well, it's a moment of honesty. It's a moment of vulnerability. It's a moment of tenderness. It's a moment of togetherness.
Right.
And, that I think is so much of what the worldly portrayal of sex misses out on. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at it in Hollywood, then Hollywood sex is all about body parts.
Right.
And, obviously that is true. But as marriage ripens, I think that we find that it becomes just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. And in fact, when you get over to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and I know we're going into the New Testament, but Paul has a lot of instructions here about marriage. In fact, the entire chapter is about marriage. And he talks about how the woman is supposed to give herself to the man, but the man is supposed to give himself to the woman. That we're not supposed to withhold from the other what the other wants.
Yes.
In the sexual relationship. But then he says, look, if you need to abstain for a time, and I'm trying to find the exact verse. See, in my old Bible, my verse by verse Bible, I have this marked.
All right.
In this new Bible with paragraph format, I don't.
Yeah, both of us are on new Bibles. We don't know where anything is.
Yeah.
I think you're after verse 5.
Oh, is it that early in the chapter? Yeah, do not deprive one another, except for perhaps by an agreement for a limited time that you may devote yourself to prayer. But then come together again, and here's the last part of the sentence, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Part of what sexual intimacy does within the marriage is bonding it together by hopefully removing this temptation to separate the bond.
And I think the obvious reading there is so that you don't go off and commit adultery.
Right.
But there are many temptations that Satan brings to bear on a marriage where the physical intimacy aspect isn't working right.
Right.
That will chip away at the way you interact with each other and everything.
Right. There should be a level of tenderness in a relationship that is healthy in this area. But if there is somebody if one of the partners is not finding their satisfaction there, there's going to be a lot of strife.
Absolutely.
So
are we down again?
So anyhow,
I think we may be down again.
We'll just keep on talking.
Yeah, okay.
So as we approach the Song of Solomon, since we did the introduction a couple of weeks ago, what we find here is this level of knowledge about sex that seems to has some depth to it that we would not typically expect.
This is someone who is unmarried who still seems very knowledgeable.
Right.
Both of them do.
That's right.
They've been prepared for this.
They have woman's desire. It focuses on the woman's desire, which cuts against the stereotype that we have within a Christian context, which makes it all about men. And it is the glue that is bonding this marriage together.
Yes.
And we need to take that into account. That what is the bond that's holding us together? Well, if the bond that's holding us together is the children, guess what might break as soon as the children are out of the house? Yeah, the marriage. If this bond, for the bond that's holding this marriage together is, it would kill mom and daddy if we got divorced. Well, what's going to happen when mom and daddy die? Or we're just doing this because this is what our church teaches. Well, You can not leave the church anytime you want to. What's holding you then? All these things need to work together.
Yes.
But we need to strengthen the bond like we see here.
Yes. Well,
through this depth of intimacy.
It is physical togetherness that is both the symbol and the source of togetherness in all aspects of your marriage.
Right. That's right. Okay. Well, we had some technical difficulties tonight. If you stayed with us all the way through,
if that was even possible.
Thank you very much. I need to learn how to run dual apps on this phone. I think I can. So I can record it and stream it at the same time, and maybe we can. But we haven't had technical difficulties in a long time. Once we stopped doing it, the technical difficulties pretty much stopped. And not blaming y'all or anything. Are we still live on anything? Yes. Okay, good. Then we'll keep talking. You've got the Sunday morning sermon this week,
do.
right? Yeah.
And this time it actually is going to be Jeremiah 29:11.
This is your third time to try to preach this sermon?
Yes, I just can't get over the edge.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll get pushed over the edge. If you're in the Columbia area, we'll be meeting live and in person at 10:15 Sunday morning. Matt's going to be preaching our Sunday morning service. We'll have a song service Sunday night, 5 o'clock.
That's it.
Last Sunday of the month. We always have singing. It's great. I always enjoy it. And if Tim is still watching us, I'll go ahead and give that word of encouragement at the end if you want to go ahead and put me down for that. I'll take care of that this week. Thank you very much for staying with us and watching tonight, despite the technical difficulties.
Yeah. And this whole Song of Solomon thing may last longer than we thought, because we didn't make it very far.
We did not make it past, the first 7 verses?
Yes.
So we'll
verse by verse, Song of Solomon.
Yeah, that's what everybody wants. We'll get rolling a little bit more. We're looking to begin our Wednesday night Bible classes if all the COVID numbers and everything's looking good.
It's looking good now.
In April.
Yep,
the first Wednesday in April. So that gives us a month. Let's go ahead and finish up Song of Solomon in a couple of weeks, and let's hit Ruth. Let's try to get
do
Ruth.
That. And we hate to be ruthless.
Oh, wow. We made it the whole night without a moment. Don't start. Thank you all for watching us. It's been a good day here. If you were not with us at the beginning, before we started the show, I baptized my daughter Lily into Christ, and that's
been an awesome day.
It's a joyous moment for me as a dad, and for Shelley and I as her parents. So please pray for her strength and faith. And thank you very much. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.